Warcraft The Beginning is obviously the main, the big blockbuster. I mean, this is a little bit of a disaster, to be completely honest. That's how I felt about this movie. I didn't enjoy it at all. I'm a big fan of Duncan Jones, so I was really looking forward to it. But unfortunately, it didn't work for me in the slightest. I had a few issues. It was lacking a protagonist, I felt. I mean, if you look at the kind of Lord of the Rings franchise, you've got that Frodo character who, when you inhabit this whole new world with its own set of rules, you need to embody a character and sort of see the world through their almost quite blissful kind of perspective. And we don't really have a protagonist in this film, no emotional connection. I mean, did you feel at any point that you were really caught up in the narrative, that you felt emotionally attached, that you cared about the survival of any of the characters?
No, and I think you're right, that is the biggest problem with it. You're kind of thrown straight into it, imagining or expecting to know the backstory of some of these characters, or you kind of fill it in yourself, and that's not really the way it should be done. You kind of see this, Paula Patton plays this character, and you see her in chains at the start, and then you're kind of wondering, well, how did she end up there? And it's briefly mentioned at some point later on in the film, but you're already too far into it for that to make much sense. And it happens with all the characters. So the magicians are there, or the mystics, or whatever they are, and then they've got higher powers above them as well. All of these things which probably make sense, well, probably, I know they do make sense in the game world, where you get more explanation and you get slowly introduced to these elements. Here, you're just kind of thrown straight into it. So you can't connect with anyone or anything, really. Yes, I wouldn't call it a disaster. It's not that bad for me.
I think disaster in relatively speaking. I mean, there were worse films you'll see, but the budget, the expectation to do with it, I think that the fact it's failed so miserably would push it into the disaster category.
I think that there's some good bits. I'll say the CGI is really good. I really like that. I think there's bits, because it's basically humans versus orcs for the most part. And the orcs are really well done because they're completely CGI. And there's bits where you just think, oh, this whole thing must be CGI because there's so many of them, and that works really well. The battle scenes got a bit confusing because, again, that's a combination of CGI and the human characters, and that didn't work too well. And there's no real big standout battle as well, like in Lord of the Rings, especially in the second one. There's this huge battle which I think still stands up to the test of time. The special effects in that are amazing. In this, there's no big kind of, put on the poster, put in the trailers battle that really kind of grabs you and keeps your attention.
Yeah, because I admired the way that we blur the line between good and evil, but actually that's to the film's detriment, because when it gets to the kind of the battle sequences, we don't really have a side, because I mean, obviously naturally we're empathetic towards the humans, because we can resonate with them more so than we can with orcs. But most of us. But when we're first introduced to the orcs, it almost depicts them as the protagonists, and then it plays around with the concept of who's good and who's not, to a point where you just kind of go, I have no idea who's good and who's not. And I quite like the blurring of the line, but at the same time, for me, to watch a film where there's a big conflict and not care who lives or dies is not a great thing. Really.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to the game element of it, because in that you can choose to play as either side. So you could be the humans, you could be orcs. I think there's other sides as well within that, but that would have just got too confusing. So yeah, that, if you're sticking strictly to the game, I guess trying to show both sides does work. But when you've got big battles and war scenes, you kind of need, I was saying it before, you need a set of rules that you can kind of engage with. So what does each special power do if you've got a magician, or, can a sword wielded by a human defeat a giant axe wielded by an orc who is 10 times bigger than him? You don't really know who's going to come out on top of the battles. You don't get any sense of the numbers fighting one another as well. So I was really confused by that. That is the one part of it that didn't hang together for me. And then it was kind of hard to tell some of the characters apart as well. Like the orcs all look similar, and you couldn't really figure out who was who in that.
That's your words.
Yeah, and the humans as well. To be honest, there's just a bunch of beardy blokes for the most part, and if like Game of Thrones does it really well, but that's because it's been told over 50 episodes now, and you've kind of got to that point where you instantly know who's who and which side it is, and you get a sense of where they're coming from, what the rules are in their own homes, and how that plays in with the history of their interactions with the other characters. Here, you're just expecting them to know one another and get on with one another and know exactly how these guys fight and interact. So, yeah, I guess, I mean, Duncan Jones, the director of this, has made some amazing films beforehand, and I think that is where I agree with you, that this is a letdown, because this is not Moon and this is not Source Code.
Yeah, maybe disaster was a bit strong. I spoke to Duncan Jones and I kept the word disaster out of my interview, by the way. And if you want to check out our initial reaction straight after seeing the movie, click this link now. I think it's there.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys! Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey